Namasristam manamapi Shachiputram Atra Surupam Rupam Tasakracha Muripurim Maturim Goshtvatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Ahoradika Madhvasam Rapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Guru Tammanatosmi Gurave Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namah Anandalilamaya Vigrahaya Himabhadyabhyachavi Sundaraya Tasmai Mahapremarasapradaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Bhaktya Vihina Apurata Lakshay Chilpastakamaari Tarham Kamoti Kripa Mahitam Shanam Prapana Vrinde Namasti Charanara Vindam Vrinde Namasti Charanara Vindam Govinda Madhaveti Govinda Madhaveti Govinda Damodara Madhaveti Govinda Damodara. Everyone. Hey Krishna, Hey Yadava, Hey Saketi, Govinda Damodara Madhaveti, Sham Sundar Shikanda Shekhar, Smaraha Smurali Manara, Radhikaras Komama Kripanidhe, Swapriya Charna Kinkurim Kuru. Tavaivasmi, Najivami Toyabana. Iti Vikaya Devi Tam Namam Charantikam. First of all, I offer my Sastang Dandavat Puspanjali, my heart like flowers thousands and thousands of times at the lotus feet of my holy master, my supremely worshipable spiritual Gurudev, Asmadiya Paramarajatama Guru Pada Padma, Nitya Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Ashtotarasata Sri Rupanuga Acharya Varya, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. Secondly, I offer my pranam thousands of times at the lotus feet of my Param Gurudev, to Srila Prabhupada, and to all of our Sri Rupanuga Gaudiya Guru Parampara. And finally, I offer my pranam to all my dear brothers and sisters, to all Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, Vanchakalpatarubhas, Kvasana, Pudim Papi, Vaishnava. Gurudeva ki jai. So as promised, this evening, we said we would discuss these two subjects, citta and prana. That's right. So this is a very basic ontology and something very close to us. It's the closest thing to our soul in this world, our citta and our prana. But what are they? How do they work? What functions do they perform? What's the value of even knowing it? So we want to address these things. This is part of our pedagogy in Chaitanya Academy, that when the new devotees come, the first thing they learn is their own complete layers of physiology according to the Vedic conception. And that's going to help in many ways. Why? Because our physical body is like a microcosm of the macrocosm of the universe. All the elements that are in the universe, the very way in which the Supreme Lord makes the evolutes of Prakriti, the gradual manifestation, or the phase transitions of Prakriti, the mature energy, they're all present also within this body. So it's helpful. We can understand the Lord's creation. We can understand our own body. When we understand clearly what is the body and mind, then we can know what we are not. You see? So it's actually knowledge of the self, but by via negativa. Understand? So, but not only is this very basic physiology or ontology related to our direct experience now, but this understanding will pay dividends later on in one's spiritual life, because it will extend, this understanding will extend into higher siddhantas and even into the analogous elements of the spiritual world, and give great insights into many different tattvas and higher bhavs as well. So what we want to discuss this evening, first we want to set the scene by defining what is the citta and prana in a practical way for our everyday life and why it's relevant. And then we want to take this and see how it's applied on different levels of siddhanta, going up to the highest moods of the Prajagopis. Yeah? So, excuse me for being rather ambitious this evening, but we'll try to complete this within the designated time. Okay, let's put in a box. There we are. We'll start at the beginning. There we are. So this seminar is called Citta and Prana, based on the Vedic knowledge. Now, we want to start with a verse from the Mundak Upanishad. And Srila Prabhupada has quoted this in his purports to Bhagavad Gita. In this verse it is said, Eisho nur atma chaitasa veditabhya. Eisha means this. And anu means atomic. Atma means the self. You know, because there's a confusion. Some spiritualists think that the Atma, the soul, is all-pervading, or that it's actually Brahman, it's the supreme Brahman. But actually, the Upanishads tell us, no, don't get delusions of grandeur. You are an atom. Really, really tiny, insignificant thing. But significant in the sense that the soul is transcendental and eternal. And the soul has great potential. We'll discuss that later. But here's the first thing. Esho anur atma. The soul is anu. It is a particle, is atom, an indivisible particle of spiritual energy of the Lord. And chaitasa veditabhya. Veditabhya means it should be known. It is to be known. In other words, it's your kartavya, it's your duty to know what it is. It's everyone's duty to know the Atma. And how can it be known? Chaitasa. Chaitasa means by the citta, by the pure citta, pure consciousness. So, first line, this Atma is atomic and it is our duty to know it. And it can be known by the pure citta. So, now this raises more questions than it answers, because what's the citta? We'll get around to it gradually. Now, yasmin prana panchada sambivesha. The pran has entered into the citta in panchada. Panchada means panchavidya, in 5 types. So actually the pran is only one, but according to the function that the pran performs, it has 5 names. So the pran that deals with the ingestion, is called pran. The pran which deals with the expulsion from the body is apan. You look how beautiful the language is. The actual word is anna, anna, anna. And from the Sanskrit anna comes the English word animate, animated, animus, that which is alive and moving, that has activity and consciousness. So that which is animated in Sanskrit is called ana. And so when the prefix pra, vi, ut, up, some are added, it becomes pra-ana, prana. So the prana it's called prana, which manifests the ingestion, taking in, and the apana pushes down, and so you can pastu. You can eject from the body. The udana means ut-ana. That is the prana that goes up, gives you the power to speak. Because when you speak, you can feel it coming from down here and it goes up. And the viana, vyana, that actually goes out and it makes the whole respiratory system work and sends energy to the muscles. So it is vyan. And then saman. Saman is mainly in the area of the solar plexus and it makes balance of the other prans and it is responsible for the digestive system, the proper working of the digestion. So if you have pranic imbalance, then you will have all types of health problems. Okay, so now this pran does not only pervade the body, but it also pervades the subtle body, the mind, or the citta. So here it's directly described that Yasmin prana panchada samvivesha, 5 types of pran have entered into the citta. Srila Prabhupada says that the atomic soul is floating on the 5 types of air. So the pran is very close to the soul. So when we die, what happens? The pran actually pushes the atma out. If you're pious, you come out through the mouth. If you're impious and you're going to hell, then you'll go in the downward direction. But up and like this, and the soul goes along with the pran and the citta to the next body. And then the atma enters, and then the pran spreads everywhere and begins to coordinate all the movements, all the motions in the development of the next body. You see, because prana is responsible for that. It is invested with kriya shakti, the power to act, and it coordinates and it moves everything in the way, if one is sattvic, in a very balanced way, so you can be healthy. So now in the next line, come to the next line. Pranas chitam sarvam otam prajanam. Prajanam means of the people. Of the people, their chitta is chitam sarvam otam. Sarvam, it is all the chitta of the people, it is otam. The word otam means interwoven. The chitta of everyone is interwoven. Pranais here means by the pran. So if you can imagine that your mind stuff is interwoven, like so many threads are going through it, threads of pran. And these threads of prana going up and down and expanding and so on, like this. And so the movement of pran in your chitta is called chitta vritti, right? And all of our thoughts, all of our feelings, all of our perceptions, they are the results of a chitta vritti. Now, in the last line of this verse, it says, Yasmin vishuddhe vivattesh atma, and if the chitta is purified from the movements of the material pran, then vibhavati esha atma, the glory of the soul shines forth. In other words, our soul is glorious. How can it not be glorious? Mamaivang sajiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana. It's a part of Krishna. And Krishna has manifested us, each and every one of us, with a glorious prospect that one day we'll be his intimate, loving associates. So the soul has a great glory, but as long as the chitta is oscillating with the movements of pran and affected by the gunas in this way, then the glory of the soul remains hidden. So we'll try to make it clearer, because there's just so much in this one verse of the Mandaka Upanishad. So we want to look at each of the points one by one. Now, what is citta? This is the definition of citta given by Lord Kapil Dev in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. First of all, I want to say, perhaps you know that before the creation of the world, the material substance, the unmanifest, pure potential material ingredient is called pradhan, right? So everything in the world is a manifestation of this pradhan. But before variety comes to it, it's just a pure, non-differentiated potential, and it's called pradhan. Now, what happens is, by the glance of the Supreme Lord, the three gunas enter into the pradhan, and now it's become like charged. It's charged with the energy of three gunas, but the three gunas at first, they're in equilibrium. So sattva, rajas, and tamas, they're in complete equilibrium. So there's no creation. Now, by the glance of the Lord, which is his wish, along with his glance, that is, the halo of his glance is called Kal, the Kal Purush. It's actually Lord Shiva. So he is the Kal Purush, time personified. And just as the male Shiva agitates the female Parvati, so Kal, the energy of time, breaks the equilibrium of the three modes. And as soon as the equilibrium of the three modes is broken, then the first material element manifests. And this first material element is also, it's the most sattvic thing that exists. There's no completely pure sattva in the material energy, because the three gunas are always mixed together, but it's as sattvic as anything can be in this world. And that first element, it's very bright, shining, lucid, and it's called Mahat Tattva, right? It's called Mahat Tattva. Now, this element, when it's in the universe, it's called Mahat Tattva. But in your body, the small portion of the Mahat Tattva, which is in your, it is not in the gross body, it's in the subtle body, the same element, Mahat Tattva, the portion of it which is in your subtle body is called citta. So now you know what is citta. Citta. Now this citta is very bright, very shining, it's very luminous. But what happens is, because it's very sattvic also, it's niskriya, it doesn't do anything. And so what is reflected there is a jnana shakti, the Lord's jnana shakti, the power to know, the power to reflect. But then Rajagun comes, and Rajagun causes the citta to condense, to grossify. We can give an example. Let's say there is water around us at all the time right now, whatever. In the atmosphere, it's like 24%, depending on the humidity, but around there. So you can't see it. The water is everywhere in a form of vapor, but due to atmospheric conditions, in the form of gas, but due to atmospheric conditions, what happens? It condenses and becomes vapor and becomes a cloud in the sky, right? So the cloud is more gross. There's a grossification of that element into a cloud. And then when it grossifies even more, what happens? The cloud becomes liquid. The vapor becomes liquid and it falls in the form of rain. And then if it's really cold, what happens to the water? It undergoes another phase transition and it becomes ice, a solid. So that's basically what happens in the process of creation of the universe. The process of the creation of the universe is as from the sattvic state, rajas and tamas, which are grosser, begin to manifest to greater degrees. There's a grossification of the one energy, Mahat Tattva, into the various evolutes of Prakriti. So when the when the Mahatattva, which is just does not move, it has no kind of tangible substance, but it's just bright, but it condenses into, it's not exactly liquid, but just to give you some idea, just as a liquid can flow and move, right? So it condenses and it becomes an element called Sutra Tattva. And it's the first element that has Kriya Shakti, or passion, the power to move. And that Sutra Tattva, which can move, which has some rajas in it, is called, it is actually the pran. That is the pran of the universe. But in the portion of the Mahatattva, which is in your subtle body, which is called citta, that condensation of your citta is called your pran. So there's the pran in the universe and the pran in you also. And it's called Sutra Tattva. Sutra means a thread. It's like a thread because it runs in like streams. And that's why the previous verse we looked at, it says, the citta of all the living entities is interwoven by the pran, because the pran is Sutra Tattva, it's like threads. Let's say if you're wearing a cloth with a colored pattern on it. Why is there a colored pattern? Because there are these colored threads who are interwoven with the cloth and it's making the colored patterns. So in the same way, similarly, the pran or Sutra Tattva is like threads and it's running through the Mahatattva, and that's causing all the motion of the universe. And it's also causing all the motion of your citta, of your psychological body. Now what happens is, let's say your senses see something, your senses come in contact with something. Then what happens is the citta, the pran in the citta moves and it makes a shape. And that shape is a model or a facsimile of the real object. So this is how you perceive things. You're not actually directly seeing the world. You're seeing, your soul is looking at your citta, and your citta is changing shapes and making a model of the outside world. Just like, see, where did I put? There it is. Let's say you're taking a photograph. You point the lens, the camera at something, and what happens? The screen transforms and makes a model of what's in front of the lens, right? So when you're taking a photo, you're not looking at the object, you're looking at the model on the screen. So that's exactly what you're doing now. Your senses touch the world, and the pran moves in your citta and makes a model. And that's what you're seeing. That's how you perceive. That's why if someone has a high fever or they're affected by a drug which disturbs the pran, then they see that things are moving. They're not moving, right? If everyone else will look, it's still, but they're seeing it's moving because their pran is disturbed. And so the model that they're able to create within is unsteady because of disturbance of the pran. Okay? Now, when the citta transforms and makes a model, as you're experiencing it, that moment, it's called a pratyay. It's called a pratyay. Let's say I'm looking at this a tulsi here. So my citta is making a model and I'm seeing that. That's a pratyay. But when I look away, then it makes a pratyay of what's in front of me instead. But that pratyay doesn't disappear. It goes into the subconscious mind. It's stored. So the citta actually stores all the models of the things that we experience. And they actually they solidify in the citta. As you're moving, the citta is moving and it's kind of liquid. It's changing according to what you're seeing. But what's recorded is like a solid image. So what are the solid images stored within the citta called? They're called samskars. Okay? They're called samskars. Now what happens if this citta, which is really bright, becomes filled with millions and millions of sanskars of the physical material world? The citta becomes dark. So the darkened mass of sanskars, where tamagunas come now, because it's a certain tamagun makes inertia. So in order to freeze an experience, there has to be a kind of mental inertia. You see? So that darkened mass of impressions due to the tamagun is called ahankar. So ahankar is also known as vasanamai ahankar. It's made of vasanas. Vasana actually means desires, but the relationship between sanskar and desire is that when a sanskar comes into your mind, you go, oh, I want that. You see, so our desires actually come from we see something and it triggers from our subconscious mind a previous experience. And when that's triggered and it comes into the conscious mind, we think, now I have a desire. But it's not, it's an echo of a past experience. So if it were a past experience of, say, sense gratification, then the sanskar comes into the conscious mind and you feel, this thing has the potential to give me pleasure because that was the impression from before, and then you become attached to, and you want it, you see. So the actual, in the Yoga Sutras, he said, as is the sanskar, so is the vasana. As is the impression, so is the desire. So also in the same way, when we meet pure devotees, by their mercy, they bless us. By their glance, by their words, they can bless us. And it causes vishesh sanskar, an intense impression in the heart. And that impression makes Krishna Seva Vasana, the desire to serve Krishna. And it's the Bhakti Lata Bij, the seed of devotion. You see? So without understanding these points very carefully, you can't even understand the very basics of bhakti. Understand? It's all kind of vague and fuzzy. So this is why the Srimad Bhagavatam explains the process of creation. The point isn't to make us like, cosmologists or something and giving a lecture on National Geographic about the universe. The point is to equip us with the metaphysics that we need to understand everything about bhakti in a scientific way. So, yes, the Bhakti Lata Bij is Krishna Seva Vasana, the desire to serve Krishna, because the sadhu blesses you with a vishesh sanskar, a special impression. Now, let's discuss little. Oh yeah, now, we've got as far as what? Citta, prana, or sutra tattva, ego, which is composed of the dense mass of solidified impressions. Those impressions are not all activated at the same time, right? Because a person has got impressions of being a dog, of being a demigod, of being a king, of being a beggar. We have so many impressions. And when by our karma we take birth in a particular set of circumstances, then the sanskars which are related to that environment become active. So we can give an example. Let's say there's a lake. And in the lake, there's lots of little particles of dust. And when the moon shines, then the light of the moon is reflected off those particles of dust, and you see it in the water. Like that. So those particles of dust in the lake, which are illuminated right now, you could compare that to your active samskars related to your personality, who you think you are right now. Right? But as the moon moves through the sky, what does it do? It leaves some particles of dust behind and moves to new ones, right? They're all floating there. And so the illuminated area is moving across the lake. So in the same way, in Gita, Krishna says, Purusha prakriti stohi bhungte prakriti jangunan karanam guna sangosya sad asadyoni janmashu. Purush, the living entity who's situated in prakriti, tries to enjoy the three gunas. And by his association with the gunas, he takes birth in sad and asad, in pious and impious births. So the gunas that we associate with in this life cause the activation of sanskars related to that. So let's say you do rajasic and tamasic things. So it activates those sanskars and you move in that direction. And then in your next life, your personality, because the illuminated area has moved to another place, maybe some of them are still active, but new ones have become activated and others have become deactivated. And so that now in your next life, you're a more rajasic and tamasic person. But let's say you associate with more sattvic people, right? And so you become elevated. And so then your more sattvic samskars are activated and the lower ones become deactivated. So it's really amazing because, we become very attached to our personality. This is who I am. No one can change me. Regrets, I had a few. But then again, too few to mention. Why? Because I did it my way. Right? Everyone's so attached to their personality. But the ridiculous thing is that the soul is a transcendental being, part and parcel of God, and his consciousness is just illuminating one set of impressions out of millions of impressions, and during the life and over many lifetimes, it's all shifting. So your personality is not a fixed thing. It's not even you at all. Just give it up. Stop, get help. You see? So these very basic things are very important. This is Gyan. When you practice bhakti, Gyan and Vairagya, knowledge and detachment from your ego, it comes automatically. So, from the ahankar, which is mainly tamasic, it's not uniformly tamasic, it's tamasic to varying degrees. So the portion of the ego, which is slightly more sattvic, from that comes the element of mind. So your mind, which is accepting and rejecting, is actually, that is what I call the post-egoistic mind. It's the mind which is the product of the ego. It's below the shadow of the ego. So all the thoughts in that post-egoistic mind are coming from the ego. Whereas the citta is what is, for a person who is not purified, that is their subconscious. That's the pre-egoistic mind. But that's covered now. It's hidden. It's not accessible. So the portion of the ego which is more, let us say, rajasic, from that comes the buddhi, intelligence. So our subtle body has 4 components: manas, buddhi, ahankar, and the deepest one, citta. Now remember that the manas, buddhi, and ahankar, they're all grossifications or devolutions or condensations of citta. So the original ingredient is only citta, and everything else is pollution on the citta. And now you can understand Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's first teaching, Chaito Darpana Marjanam. Here, Chaito means the citta. It's like a mirror, but it's become dirty. You see? And that dirt is the rajas and tamas in the citta, which is brought about the material ego, the material mind, and material intelligence. And so when we steady our consciousness, when we're chanting and trying to become free from the modifications, the oscillations, psychological oscillations, and attain a peaceful state of mind and absorption in the holy name, what actually happens is the reverse process of creation. Just as the ego, the intelligence, and the mind were the devolutes of the citta, as you become free from rajas and tamas, they dissolve back into each other until you just have a shining citta. And now the mirror of the heart is clean. Chaito Darpana Marjana. Yeah? Are we all on the same page? I don't want to rush it too fast because it's a little bit conceptually dense. So you have to catch each step. Otherwise, if I go to the next one, it will be fuzzy. So we don't want any vague or fuzzy ideas. Everything should be crystal clear, laser sharp, high resolution. Tattva Gyan. Not Nishchay. Sorry, not the Sangshay. Sangshay means doubt. If things aren't clear, then you have Sangshay, doubt. So this kata does what? The removal of doubt. Now, let's have a little look at Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 26, verse 22. Kapil Dev is describing the definition of the chitta. He says, Swachatvam avikaritvam shantatvam iti chaitasa vritti be lakshanam praktam yatapam prakriti para. He said the chitta is like pure water, just as water can be pure, but it can become polluted. So similarly, the chitta is such that it can become polluted. But if it's free from pollution, then what are the lakshana? What are the characteristics of it? So he gives three characteristics. One, swachatvam. Two, avikaritvam. And three, santatvam. So we'll do them in reverse order. Shantatvam means the quality of peacefulness. So peacefulness means when the chitta is pure, then you are rag, dvesh. You are desireless, free from attachment. When the chitta is peaceful, then it's not grasping at anything. One feels self-satisfaction. Santosh, satisfaction. Santatvam. Now, avikaritvam means it has no vikar, it's not transforming. So when there are transformations there, then this causes the bikshep, distraction, you can't concentrate. And also lie. Lie means the sleepiness. So if the chitta isn't pure when you're chanting, either you can't concentrate or you fall asleep. And these are the vikar, the transformations of chitta. So the pure chitta is avikaritva. Tva means ness. So it's vikar, transformation, avikaritvam, untransformationalness. And there's no word in English. So it's not subject to transformation. Okay. Now, why did I leave this one till the first one till last? Because this is really the most important and so valuable. Swachatvam. Now, swachatvam means clear. It means clear. But especially our acharyas like Sridhar Swami, the original commentator on Srimad Bhagavatam, and Vishwanath Thakur, they say swachatvam means Bhagavad Bimba Grahitvam. The Grahitva means the power to accept, and Bhagavad Bimba means the reflection of God's form. So when the chitta is in its steady, pure state, it has the characteristic of swachatvam, that is, the power to receive the reflection of God's beautiful form. And that's why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu compares the chitta to a mirror. So as soon as the chitta comes into the state of nishta, ekagrata, steadiness, then by the Lord's mercy, he allows his beautiful form to be reflected on your chitta, and you can see that when you're chanting. You see, from the stage of nishta. So nishta, when our faith is in the stage of nishta, then we can purchase what? Rupa Yuktana, the name which is imbued with the form of Sri Krishna. That's the beginning of our anubhav, realization. Okay. So another name for the purified chitta is, it is said to be the upasana sthanam. It means the place where upasana takes place. So we think about upasana, it means like service, upasana, to sit near the Lord and serve him. So different types of upasana, you can serve the deity, this is one type of upasana. And in meditation, you have mantramaya upasana and swarasika upasana. So that means serving internally. But just see, where does the internal service take place? Swachatvam means two things: upasana sthanam, the place of service, and upalabdhi sthanam, the place of realization. Upalabdhi means attainment. So it should be understood that the place where the form of the Lord is reflected, that is Bhagavad Bimba Grahitva, it has that quality. The place where we do our internal service to Krishna, that is the upasana sthanam, or the place where we attain our first realizations, upalabdhi sthanam, That is the chitta in its purified state, or let us say, the pre-egoistic mind, the aspect of our psychological body before it devolves into ego, right? Now, just see, you can very easily understand what is Sohajya and what is pure bhakti. Now, because if someone is doing manasik seva, but they haven't cleansed away the rajasic buddhi intelligence, they have not cleansed away the darkness of the material sanskars of the ego, and they have not yet attained access to the shining, bright internal chitta, then where is this manasik seva taking place? It's just all the vikar, transformation of material mind and ego and intelligence. It's actually not manasik seva. When these elements become suspended or dissolved because one has nishta, then the chitta becomes exposed, and then the realization comes and the opportunity gradually to serve Krishna. Understand? So there's a huge difference between actual internal seva and speculation. But you can understand the difference if you jumped over the 10th canto. Sorry, you jumped over the 3rd canto. You jumped over the 10th and the 11th canto, because it's also explained the same things in detail again by Krishna in the 11th canto. And you just jumped to Govinda Lilamrita without understanding any proper tattva or siddhanta. And now you're doing the Astakali Lila Seva in your swarup to Radha and Krishna. But actually, you're just underneath the darkness of ego, speculating with the material mind, making a collage out of your samskars of material existence. Just piecing them all together to make a fake imitation of the spiritual world, while still affected by rajas and tamas. But Krishna is nirgun. Bhakti is nirgun. Lakshanam bhakti yogasya nirgunasya udarita. Kapil Dev also in the 3rd canto said the characteristic of bhakti is that it's nirgun. You see? So when our acharyas say, oh, this is wrong, this is haja, everything, they're not insulting anyone. It's like literally a scientific diagnosis of what they're doing, imitating those persons who have actually dissolved the lower elements of the subtle body and experiencing Krishna in the purified chitta. That's one category of person. And those who are still contaminated and they're just making a collage of their material experiences, which is an imitation of service to Krishna in the contaminated mind. And that's why Mahaprabhu's first teaching, Chaito Darpana Marjanam. First cleanse the heart by hearing, especially hearing loud Harinam Sankirtan. And we can come to that state. Okay? So, Swachitvam, Avikaritvam, very beautiful definition of chitta, 3rd canto spoken by Lord Kapil Dev. Is it clear to everyone? Yes, okay, then we'll progress. Okay, now I want to speak a little bit about the definitions of yoga. There you are. In the Yoga Sutras, that's Bhagavad Gita. That's Bhagavad Gita first. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 48, Sri Krishna says, Samatvam yoga uchate, which means yoga is equilibrium of mind. So any activity or process that you're engaging in, which brings about your psychological stability, equilibrium of mind, Krishna says that's yoga. You know, sama means the same. So samatvam, sameness. Samatvam yoga uchate, yoga is called equilibrium of mind. Okay? Now, in the Yoga Sutras, just as Krishna has stated a definition of yoga positively, in the Yoga Sutras, the exact same thing is stated in the 2nd sutra, but negatively. There, Patanjali says, Yogas chitta vritti nirodha. So we've heard what chitta vritti is. In the chitta, it's contaminated by rajas, and the prana, the sutras, the threads of prana moving, they're chitta vrittis. That's every one of our thoughts, feelings, desires, and perceptions. That's all it is. It's all just chitta-vritti, the whole lot. So Patanjali is saying here, chitta-vritti nirodha. Nirodha means restraint. So the path of yoga is the method by which we restrain the oscillations of the mind, so we can attain equilibrium. So we can see the definition in Gita and the definition in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. They're the same, just positive and negative expression. And so let's say if you're speaking about something like karma yoga, Karma yogas means doing your job and doing your duties without attachment. Why? Because if you do them without attachment, you become calm. And therefore it's yoga, because yoga is samatva, or yoga is chittavritti nirodha. You see? Let's say if you're doing jnana yoga, so you're remembering the philosophical categories of the elements, you're studying them in jnana yoga. Why? So that you can make your mind peaceful. And that's why it's called a type of yoga. In dhyana yoga, ashtanga yoga, you do pranayam, because the pran is basically the movements of pran are your chitta vrittis. And because they're connected to the pran in the body, if you slow down your breathing, you slow down your mental chitta vrittis as well. You see? So they're all trying to do the same thing, but by different approaches. And that's why they go by the names of yoga. In Bhakti Yoga, we also become free from the material chitta vrittis by overlaying them with the spiritual vritti, the vibration of Harinam. So we'll come to that later. It's really fascinating. Okay, so now is it clear, the definitions of yoga, what it means? Now, oh there, look at chitta vritti. Everything's oscillating and became confusing. So in the Yoga Sutras, in the next sutra, Patanjali says, Tada drastu srupaevastanam. That means when the oscillations of the mind have become restrained, then tada means then, at that time, drastu, that means the seer. Who is the seer? The Atma, right? We're not the mind or anything, we're the Atma. So when the oscillations die down, then the Atma drastu swarupe avasthanam is situated in his swarup. In other words, we realize I'm spiritual. I'm not a product of this world. I'm an eternal, transcendental, conscious spiritual being. His swarup doesn't mean you're like Braj swarup. It just means that you realize you're Satchidananda, you're an atomic particle of conscious energy, completely distinct from all the dead, inert elements of the material world. The world is dead. It only seems to be alive because there's Kriya Shakti in Pran that makes things move. Mode of passion. Okay, so when the mind becomes in equilibrium, then Drastu, the soul, is situated in his nature. In other words, he realizes himself as being distinct from the material elements. Now, what happens? Oh, there's another Chittavritti. In the next sutra, Patanjali says, Vritti surapyam itaratya. Itaratya means otherwise. If the mind isn't steady, then vritti swarupyam. One attains swarupya. That means you feel yourself to be the same as the vrittis, right? So if your ego, particular set of sanskar is activated and a particular set of desires are activated, when your mind is not in equilibrium, then as a soul, your identity becomes blended with it, and you feel this is my personality and these are my desires, and I have to do whatever my mind says. We don't even distinguish, my mind is saying, we just say, I want it, right? It's just, I want this thing, you see? So all worldly desires, they're just born from the mind, but we're identifying with them. This is the mistake. Interesting. If you look at our Acharya's commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, there's in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna poses this question to Sri Krishna. He says, "O Krishna, by what is one engaged in some sinful activity, even against one's will, as if by force?" Remember that question of Arjuna? "O Krishna, by what is one engaged in some sinful activity against anicca? Even you don't want to do it, but anyway, you feel impelled, as if by force." It's an important question, isn't it? Isn't that important to everyone? Huh? Such a relevant question for the whole world, for someone who wants to progress. And what answer does Krishna give? What's his reply to that?
It's lust.
Yeah, remember the verse? He says, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajaguna Samudbhavaha, Mahashano Mahapapma Videnam Hyavarinam, Avritam Gyanametena, Gyanino Nityavarina, kama rupena kunteya dushparena analena cha. He said, hey Arjun, O Kunti, son of Kunti, it is only calm, lust, which is born from the mode of passion and which turns into anger, which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of the world. Abritam jnanametena. This lust, abritam, covers your knowledge that you're a soul. You become completely lost to yourself. This lust covers the knowledge that we are a soul, and abritam jnanametena jnanino nityavarina, and it is the enemy of the jnani, of one who wants knowledge. Dushparena analena cha, and it's like a fire in the sense that it doesn't matter how much fuel you give to a fire, it doesn't go out. Actually, it increases. So when we try to indulge our sensory desires, there's satisfaction for just a moment, but then the impression causes them to rise up even stronger before. So that's how the cycle of addiction goes on. Cycle of addiction. Krishna's exactly explaining the cycle of addiction. So let's go into this more deeply and look at the commentaries of our acharyas. So the acharyas have said that the essence of Arjun's question is this. The essence is this. He's saying, I feel forced, I feel impelled to do something that I don't want to do. So I'm not the one who's making me do this because I don't want to do it. And in every activity, you can't do anything without the help of the Paramatma, right? Because the Paramatma, Maya Dyakshena Prakriti Suyate Sacharacharam. By the glance, the supervision of the Paramatma, all the material energy moves. But Arjun's thinking, even though everything takes place with the permission of Paramatma, he's the permitter, upadrasta anumantascha. He sees and he permits things to happen. But the Paramatma could not possibly be the one who's forcing me to engage in sinful activity, right? So I don't want to do it, and the Paramatma doesn't want to do it. So what's making me do it? This is the essence of Krishna's question. Amazing, huh? When you go into Bhagavad Gita deeply, it's so wonderful. So when Krishna gives the answer, Arjuna has another question as well. His other part of his question is, I don't want it, Paramatma doesn't want it, and it also can't be my samskars. Why can't it be my sanskars? Because sanskars are like pictures. They're just like pictures in the subconscious mind, and they come into the conscious mind in the form of a mental image, right? So let's say that it's January the 1st, you made a new New Year's resolution, no chocolate ice cream, right? But then someone comes up with a photograph and shows you the photograph of the chocolate ice cream. Now the photograph is not just going to grab you and force you to go to the refrigerator and get out that gallon tub and a good spoon and dig into it. The photo can't do that, right? The photo doesn't have the power to do that. So I don't want to do it. The Paramatma would never engage me in sins. And sanskars are just like pictures in the mind. So what's going on? What's forcing me? So that's why Krishna replies, Kama Esha Krodha Esha Rajaguna Samudbhava. It is calm. Here the word calm means avidya, ignorance. You see? Because Rajagun is the avidya vritti of Maya. It is the aspect of Maya which promotes ignorance. Whereas Sattvagun is the vidya vritti of Maya. Sattvagun is still Maya, but it's the vidya vritti. It promotes discrimination, even up to discrimination between matter and spirit. So here calm means the mode of passion, the avidya vritti. And what's the function of avidya? Our soul has consciousness. It's actually made of consciousness. It's made of jnana. But it also has the jnana vritti. That means its function of consciousness also extends from itself. Just like the sun is luminous and light extends from it. So our soul is the conscious. And consciousness also extends from the soul. That is the Atma Gun, and is called the Jnana Vritti, the function of knowledge, consciousness, awareness. It extends from the soul. And it extends from the soul into the citta and all of those samskars. You see? So that's how you're aware of your mind. That's how you're aware of the inner images. By the extension of Gyan Britti, the light, let us say, the light of the soul shining into the impressions in the citta. So the energy of the Lord that makes the samyog, the union between your Jnana Britti, your awareness, and the impressions is called avidya. Avidya is that energy which makes the samyog, the union between your consciousness and the impressions. And then you feel as if this impression is your desire. You see? If avidya goes away, the impression can just come and you ignore it. We mentioned that the other day. Apuryamanam achala pratishtam. As rivers flow into the ocean, but the ocean never exceeds its banks. So Krishna says, the person into whose mind desires come, but he doesn't identify with them, he can attain peace. Not the person who acts on the desires. In other words, what's in his mind overflows into the action of his body and senses in the world. That's the overflowing. You see? So, avidya makes the conjunction. Avidya is the energy that makes, mode of passion makes the conjunction between your awareness and the samskar. And then you feel like, I have to do it. Due to that conjunction. It's amazing. So when a person by chanting is becoming free from avidya, then they can see the desires coming, but there's no conjunction. So it doesn't affect them. Haribo, yes. That's the only way to drive this avidya away. Haribo, the power of the holy name, makes the disjunction. The disjunction. There's a conjunction. It makes it separates us from the identification. Okay, so here, what is Patanjali saying is saying, if the mind is disturbed by the mode of passion, then you identify vritti swarupyam. You identify swarupyam. You think, I am of the nature of those vrittis. That's what we're discussing. So that's in the Yoga Sutras. Let's look at Srimad Bhagavatam. Oh, the vrittis are coming again. So here's a verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. And this also explains exactly the same thing as those two sutras of Patanjali. Actually, this verse is spoken by Hiranyakashipu. So sometimes, the demons, they're also very learned in Shastra. They can quote Shastra and they know many conclusions and philosophical points. It's just that they use them for the wrong purposes. Sri Radha Govinda Ju Ki Jai. Okay. So I wanted to explain how this applies in the very higher things, but I'm seeing it's really necessary to go slowly. So we'll just lay the platform today of understanding the subject, and then in the next class we'll go on to how it's applied in different levels of Siddhanta and how it's really valuable. So here in Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 7, actually here Hiranyakashipu is trying to pacify the widows of his brother who just got killed. They're all crying, and he's trying to speak some Siddhanta to them to make them, become free from lamentation and attachment. So he's saying, Evam guna brahmyamane manasi avikala puman. The meaning here is that manasi, that means the mind, of whom? Puman, the jiva. The jiva himself is avikala, he's unchanging. The jiva doesn't undergo modifications, but his mind is modifying. How? Brahmyamane means that his mind is moving, and what's moving it? Gunair, the gunas. So the living entity is still, he's unmodified, but his mind is being moved by the gunas. Now come to the second line. Yati tat samyatam badre. O Badre, O auspicious lady, he's speaking to his wife. O auspicious lady, when the mind is oscillating due to the influence of especially Rajagun, then yati tat samyatam. The soul thinks samyatam, I am those modulations. He attains a state of as if he had sameness with the modifications of the mind, all those impressions and desires and everything. That's me. You see? And so, Hyalingo Lingaban Iva. Ling is the name of the subtle body. We have a Stul Sharir, that is the gross body. Some persons' bodies are more gross than others. But this is the gross body of 5 physical elements. And then within that, we have the Shukshma Sarira, the subtle body. Right? So the subtle body is also called Ling. It's also called Ling. Have you heard the song of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Jai Jai Harinam, Chidanandamrita Dham? What does he say? Lingabhanga, Anayase. Only by Nama Bas, the Ling, that means the subtle body is broken. It's destroyed, even by Nama Bas. Lingabhanga, Anayase. So here, Hiranyakashipu is saying, of course, Hiranyakashipu is actually Jai. He's a devotee. So Jai is saying that Alingo, the soul is Aling. The soul doesn't have a subtle body, a material subtle body. It's not us. It's completely external. The soul intrinsically has nothing to do with this ling. But Alingo, that person who doesn't have a subtle body, Lingavan Iva, he becomes as if he has a subtle body. You see, just like Bhagavan means the one who possesses all fortune, so Lingavan means one who possesses a subtle body. Of course, we never possess a subtle body, actually. We're always transcendental. The soul is actually always in a liberated state. Ishvarasya vimuktasya. In the 3rd canto, it's also stated, the soul is always liberated. He is aling, he doesn't have a subtle body. But when the gunas are acting in his mind, then alingo, the soul who has no subtle body, lingavan becomes a possessor. No, lingavan iva. Iva means like. So you never actually have a subtle body. But the experience is as if you have a subtle body. That's why it said, alingo lingavan iva. The being who has no subtle body becomes as if he has a subtle body. Why? Because the avidya vritti makes the conjunction between your awareness and that subtle body which is disturbed by the gunas. When the disturbance goes down, then that is, rajas goes away, avidya goes away, you become separated. That is called the Deya Atma Vivek, the power to discriminate between the body and the soul. Everyone's heard the famous motto, "You're not the body, Prabhu." Right? It's easy to say it again and again. And it can become hackneyed, it can become cliched, it can become worn out. So we have to learn to understand it very scientifically so it's fresh. This is the actual meaning, what it means to feel as if you are the body or to realize that you are not the body. So let's move along to the next topic. Okay, so now you may be asking, what is Prem Prayojan talking about, this Sutra Tattva and everything? I've never seen it before. So I just want to give some pramans so you can understand. If I'm speaking something, you should know it's in Shastra, otherwise I wouldn't say it. This is the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. There he said, Param Pradhanam Purusham Mahantam Kalam Kavin Trivritam Lokapalam. In the translation, it is said, Kapilam Prapadyai, I take shelter of the Supreme Lord, the form of Kapila, whose other form, that means his separated energy, is Prakriti. And he also manifests, his energy manifests as the Jiva, as the Mahat Tattva, as Kal, time, and as the Sutra Tattva, and Ahankar, and as the Devatas, and as all directions. So if you study this verse 324-33 and you read the commentaries of the Acharyas, they explain that this verse is describing the Sutra Tattva. Then again in the 11th canto, 3rd chapter, verse 37, you can see the second line. Sutram Mahan Aham Iti Prabhadanti Jivam. Then that one Brahman shines in the form of his external energy, Maya, with sattva, rajas, and tamas. And as sutra, it's in the second line, sutra, as mahat, that is the mahat tattva, and as ahankar, and as powerful energies. And then he takes the form of the devatas, the senses, the sense objects, and material qualities. So these are the main two verses in Srimad Bhagavatam which introduce us to the idea of we know manas, buddhi, ahankar, and chitta, but in between chitta and ahankar, there is the kriya shakti. Ahankar is tamasic, chitta is sattvic, and in between there's a stage that is the kriya shakti, and that is called Sutra Tattva, and it is the pran, which is like a thread which is interwoven everywhere in the universe, causing all types of movement. Now, okay, this is just a summary. There you are. There is Mahat in the universe. The portion of the Mahat which is Sattva in your own body is called Chitta, and it's like a screen where you can see. Actually, it's a screen anyway. It's a screen on which you're having all your perceptions of this world. It's just that when it's clean, you can see a reflection of the spiritual world in the same screen. It has a dual purpose. That's why sometimes I call the chitta. I say, if you want to see something very small, you need a microscope. If you want to see something very far away, you need a telescope. But if you want to see God, you need a theoscope. Theoscope. Huh? The instrument by which God can be perceived. So then you may ask the question, well, where do I get it from? And Krishna is so kind, he already gave it to you. It's your chitta. The only problem, you have a theoscope, but it's dirty. So we have to cleanse it every day by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. And because it has the pure chitta, has the characteristic called what? Swachatvam. Remember? Swachatvam. And what does Swachatvam mean? Clearness, purity, yes. And what does it give? Say it in Sanskrit. Grahitva. You know, grahan means to accept. So Bhagavad Bimba Grahitva, the power, the characteristic of being able to catch or receive the reflection of the form of the Lord. Bhagavad Bimba Grahitva. Learn these terms, really, learn these terms. It's like neuro-linguistic programming. If you just learn the terms, now it will become your language and gradually become fluent in the sadhu bhasha, the language of sadhus. So sattva, in sattva gun, sattvic portion of mahat in you is the chitta. The rajasic portion is sutra, and that is the original pran, and it has kriya shakti, rajas movement. And then a darkened form of the mahat where there are solidified mass of impressions is called ahankar, the ego, material ego. You don't worry. If you want all these slides, just give me your email address. I'll send them all to you for free. It's like everyone's trying to take a photo of the screen and everything. Or you can watch the video online. Our IT department will take the video and edit it and put all the slides so it's not in the corner of the picture really small. So thank you to Tarakanath and the whole IT department. This is the college. You know what mat means? Gaudiya Mat. Mat means matanti vasanti chatra iti mat, the place where students live to study the Shastra. This is the meaning of the mat. So, and this education is free of cost, no charge at all. But you have to give dakshina. Whoever teaches you something, you have to give a dakshina to them. So in the 11th canto, Krishna says to Uddhav, dakshina paropakara, means the best dakshina to the guru is to take that knowledge and teach it to someone else. Para means helping others. The real guru dakshina is helping others. So I'm here today. What am I doing? I'm actually trying to give dakshina to my Gurudev. So this is the first level. Then what happens? Then there are three transformations of that ego. The more sattvic one is manas, mind, and Gyan Shakti is there. The Ahankar for the Rajasic portion is Buddhi, and also the 10 senses. The 10 senses develop from the Rajasic Ahankar. And from Tamagun comes the Dravya Shakti. That's Dravya means like substances. So the material elements are actually a tamasic transformation of Ahankar. So let's fill in all those details. Here we go. From the Rajasic Ahankar comes the Buddhi and 10 senses. Speech, grasping, mobility, reproduction, and evacuation. Those are the karmendriyas, the senses of work, karmendriyas. And then the gyanendriyas, the 5 senses by which we acquire knowledge. The sense of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell. So those senses, they're rajasic, but their objects are tamasic. So here we go. Coming from tamagun, the elements develop, starting with material sound. And material sound is the subtle form of space. Ether or akash or ka. It's called ka. You know, like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Shabda ke paurasham rishu. Oh Arjun, I am the taste in water. It's actually not the taste of water, it's the taste in water. The subtle cause of the gross element water is the rasa. Here it means the material element of taste is the cause of the gross element of water. And Shabda ke, I am the sound in ether. The subtle form of the space is sound. So sound leads to space, the tangibility, sparsha, air, and from form, fire, and flavor is the subtle form of water, and fragrance is the subtle form of earth. Okay, so that's the whole, how it comes about by the devolution, ultimately, of one element. It's only Mahatattva. You see? This is why a yogi can develop mystic powers. Because what happens is when a person can get to the stage of the ekagrata, then the consciousness is focused like a laser. And when it focuses on something, then the whole chitta transforms and becomes just like that object. So the yogi, he can get knowledge without actually making a physical investigation into something. Let's say he meditates, he says, go, cow, and he's meditating, and his mind becomes fixed, and the cow, the jati of cow appears in his mind, and he can inspect it and understand everything, how it eats the grass, how it turns it into milk. Knowledge that scientists cannot know. You can have yoga jagyan, knowledge which comes by the power of yoga. So if you meditate on the element of air, then his chitta will transform and become exactly like that element. But then, because the whole body is a transformation of the more subtle elements, that entire nature of air can now be transformed from his chitta throughout the whole body, and he begins to levitate. You see, that's how levitation works. So if you understand the actual cosmology, then you can understand how all the various powers come. He can meditate on the Manipura chakra, the chakra on the level of the navel, and by meditating on this, the entire digestive system will manifest to him, and he'll understand everything about the process of digestion. You see, so the yogi can get knowledge of this world and also different types of mystic powers. For example, if you meditate on fire, then he'll realize the nature of fire and can control it. And because it's the fire element, what does fire element give? It gives form. So he can basically switch off the element of fire in his body, and then he becomes invisible. You see? That's how a yogi, by his yoga siddhi, becomes invisible. Now, don't get attracted to all this stuff. Huh? Even Patanjali, he says, these are all distractions, just keep going. As you're doing the arohapanta, the ascending process of yoga sadhana, the mystic powers come and they're like temptations. And so you see the example of Rishabdev in Srimad Bhagavatam. When Rishabdev was doing his very intense austerities at that time, the Animalagama, Mahima, Kamavasayita, Vasita, and all the 8 siddhis personified, they all came to him. They all approached him. They were blessing him with all mystic powers. And what did he do? He just gave pranam and carried on with his meditation. He ignored them. Right? So that's the lesson there in the pastimes of Lord Rishabdev. Don't be attracted. Because what is all of this? It's all the dead material energy. It's all temporary. Okay, so does everyone have the sense of the nature of the creation? And once you know the nature of creation, you can understand all the various mystical possibilities which are described in the scriptures. Now, let's go on to the next. Now, this is just a discussion of the same thing, but just presented in ontological layers. So if you look at the top, you have Atma. The Atma is fully spiritual. Excuse me, Brendan. The Atma is fully spiritual. Now, elements manifest. Sattva is the highest ontological layer, and then the Rajasic layers come, and then the Tamasic layers come. So we'll just fill them in. There we go. The most sattvic thing is the citta. Then the next sattvic thing, which is the appearance of Rajas in the sattva, is sutra or pran, kriya shakti. And then the ahankar, the ego, is the first appearance of tamagun. Then the mind is the more sattvic portion of the ego, and the intelligence is the rajasic portion of the ego. That is the complete, all the components of your psychological body. Okay? Then you go to the next devolution. Those are the senses, their speech, grasping, mobility, reproduction, evacuation, the karmendriyas, and the gyan endriyas, hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, rajasic. And then the gross elements come that compose the physical body, starting with the tanmatras, the sense objects, they're called the tanmatras, and then from the tanmatras come the actual gross elements, space, that is ka, or that is also known as akash, air, fire, water, and earth. Okay, so that was just another summary, but just more in discussing in terms of ontological layers of your body related to sattva, rajas, and tamas. Let's go on to the next point. Oh, very interesting. Bhutanam chidradatratvam bahya antaram evacha pranindriyatmadishnatvam nabaso britilakshanam. This is the definition of akash given by Kapil Dev. Because for every single element, he gives a definition, or he may give a few verses which also discuss the functions of that element. So here, he's describing the nabas. That means the akash, the K, the ether. That is the most subtle of the gross material elements, and it comes from the sound. So he's saying, Bhutanam chitradatritvam bahya antaram evacha. Bhutanam means the elements, the bhutas. Bhutas means all these elements we're discussing. These elements need a space in which they can be accommodated. So here, chidra means a hole. You know, it means a fault or a hole. So chidra means a hole. So what that actually means, it means the akash provides a space for the movement of all the elements. But it doesn't provide the space for the movement only of the external elements, but also of your internal elements. So the second line, so bhutanam, of the elements, chidra datritvam. Datritva means having the quality of giving chidra, a space to accommodate the elements. But bahir antaram evacha, not only bahir external, but also for the internal elements. In other words, the earth, water, fire, and air of the body are moving in the akash, in the ether, but actually the manas, buddhi, chitta, and ahankar also move internally in the inner akash, in the internal akash. Okay, so that's explained here. Pranendriyatma disnyatvam. The akash provide disnyatvam means has the characteristic of being the base. It provides a platform for the pran, the indriya, and the atma. That means the pran, the senses, and the mind. Here, atma means mind. The mind, the pran, and the senses, they have a platform to move, and that's the akash, the space which is within us. Understand? Now, what happens is when Rajas and Tamas are there in your chitta, the chitta contracts. In other words, when it contracts, it occupies less akash. And that's why when you're under pressure and you're under stress and you're nervous and everything, you feel trapped. Why? Because your mind, which is actually big, is contracting. And you feel like trapped. And as your mind is contracting, all your functions of your thoughts, they can't function. You don't have room to think. Your vrittis don't have freedom to move, so you can't think properly. So that contraction of the chitta, that is what we call distress. Distress is simply the contraction of the chitta, whereby we feel trapped and we can't think properly. We become over emotional and so on. So distress is nothing but the contraction of the chitta in the akash. You see, the chitta and the chitta vrittis are accommodated by the space, by akash, and when they are contracting in the akash, that is called distress. Now, when your chitta there's more sattva gun, the chitta is expanding in the akash, and you feel more space, right? You feel more light, and that is called happiness. So happiness and distress, they're just nothing but the contraction and expansion of the chitta and its internal vrittis accommodated by akash. That's all it is. So don't get hung up on happiness and distress. Krishna says again and again in the Bhagavad Gita, the person who's not disturbed by happiness and distress is eligible for Amrit, nectar. You see? Don't get hung up. It's just an illusion. Everyone's trying to avoid suffering and get happiness. But they're just in this trap of expanding and contracting chitta in the akash. That's all it is. So, let's say, what happens is, when sattva gun comes, that means when you practice concentration, because when you concentrate, then instead of being vikshipta or distracted everywhere, when you concentrate, that means more sattva is coming in the mind. You see, if you concentrate on something. And this is why people get the happiness from, say, sport. Why? Let's say someone watching football. So what are they doing? Their mind is completely focused on this ball, going here and there, like this, right? And they're focused on what they forget about the whole life and all of their worries and everything like that. And so as they're doing this, their chitta is starting to expand and they feel happy. You see? So actually, the more you practice concentration, the more you chant, the more you learn, because it takes concentration to learn a verse. You can't learn a verse, say, if you are just spacing out here and there and distracted. So the more you do these things, then the more your chitta will expand more and more, and you feel happiness, but without any external stimulation. Even if someone is just eating a tub of chocolate ice cream, because they're totally focused on their tongue, huh? Like that, they're absorbed, they forget everything else. The tongue is just... Not yola. They're relishing the hazelnut flavor of hazelnut chocolate ice cream. So their chitta is expanding. But because of the contact with a tamasic element, immediate afterward it contracts. Then you get the sugar crash. And then you feel worse, more sad than you were before you tucked into the tub of ice cream. Like this, you see. So this is and then you feel like I have to expand my consciousness again with another tub.
Not eat ice cream.
Okay, so just consider how, I'm just giving that example. Everyone may have their pet addiction. Maybe your addiction is something else. So, but just know the mechanics of it, how it's working, and how we are illusioned by it. Now, here's something really incredible that I think you'll never forget it for your whole life. What's the word for distress in Sanskrit? Dukkha. Du means bad, ka, akash. Dukkha. because your mind is dukkha, it doesn't have ka, space to move, it's contracted, so it's called dukkha. And what is happiness? Sukha. Because your functions, mental functions have space, it is sukha, beautiful akash. So the actual words, sukha and dukkha, the words for happiness and for distress in Sanskrit, just ontologically explain exactly what's happening. Is that amazing? Interesting language. Like we have words happy, jolly, buzzing, whatever. But it's just like a subjective expression. But the Sanskrit words actually just say exactly what it is ontologically and metaphysically. Okay, let's yeah. I want to just bring up a few points now about pran. Now, pran is a sutra tattva. It's in threads and it's moving. So we have in our body Sushumna Nadi, the main nadi, from the Muladhara chakra to the Sahasrara chakra. Then, coming from the left side, we have the Ida, the female or the moon side, that comes from the left side of the Muladhara chakra and then goes from side to side like this up to the Sahasrara chakra. And then from the right side, you have the Pingala, which is the sun side or the male side, comes from the right side of Muladhara chakra and weaves backwards and forwards to the Sahasrara chakra. And then you have, from the heart, you have 101 nadis going out in all directions from the heart chakra, Anahata chakra. And then throughout the whole body, there are, in Vedanta Sutra, 72,000 nadis. Their nadis are, nadi means like river. So they're like rivers, but they're the channels through which the pran is traveling all over your body and basically orchestrating and configuring every molecule and every motion biologically in the physical body and every motion psychologically in the subtle body. So that's how it works. If you just breathe, close your right nostril and breathe through the left nostril deeply. And breathe out again. Again. Remember what it feels like. Now close the other nostril and breathe in and out. Okay, did you all notice that one side was more open than the other? Whose right side was more open? Yeah, good. You're very attentive right now. You're more focused. Because when the pran is moving on the right side, it's on the sun side, the rajasic side, so you're more alert. But because we're in the gunas in this world, so it's never steady. About every 90 minutes, we change sides. You check 90 minutes from now and it will be on the other side. Who was just right now on the left side? So that means the prana has gone more onto the moon side. That's the cooling side. And that is related to this side, rajas, the middle sattva, and this side, tama. You see? So that means you're just on a cycle where it's a little bit slower. So that's the time where you're doing stuff and you put your keys down and then you can't remember where you put your keys, right? Because you weren't paying attention, because you were just on that moment where on the side where you're not so attentive. You see? And so this is moving from side to side all the time. And that's why we're aging. We're aging because the sun, the moon, the rising of the sun and moon in the universe, it's also going on here, sun to moon, and we're aging. So the yogi who does the anulom pratilom, the pranayama, by doing that, he brings the pran into the middle, into the shumna nadi, so that's sattvic. So then the yogi can live for hundreds of years. I met one yogi in Vrindavan. Oh, were you with me? Choti Baba. He was about 164 years old. And before that, I never met him, but he used to live just across Vrindavan on the other side of the Devra Baba. And he lived to be more than 240 years old. So if the pran is in the middle, then one becomes less affected. Everyone's affected by time, but less affected by time. And so this is why the yogis, they do alternate nostril breathing, this pranayam, to move the prana into the middle. So if the prana is in balance and sattvic, then the mind, it is easier to meditate. So you have yam and niyam, rules and regulations, Asana, just sit still without moving and fidgeting for a long time. Pranayama, bring the prana into the middle and extend the cycle of breathing. And then you have pratyahara. You can withdraw the senses from the outer world, because the senses also are functions of prana going out through the body. So now you've controlled the prana, you can withdraw that. And when the senses are withdrawn from the world through pratyahara, what's the next stage? Dharana, concentration. And then dhyan, meditation. And then samadhi, trance. And so the yogi, because he's on arohapanta, that is the ascending process, he's trying to attain the state of trance by mechanically slowing down the prana, because it's connected to the mind. I just want to ask you all for just one experiment. I'm going to hold something up. I want you to look at it. I want you to focus on it completely with all your attention, totally, for 5 seconds. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Okay. Now, you may have noticed that even though I said you should focus on this, and I did not say everyone hold your breath, everyone went. Did you notice that? Yeah? Everyone stopped breathing. Is it because the prana and the fluctuations of the mind are connected. So when you slow down the breath, the mind becomes steady. And conversely, we mentioned this other day, if the mind is disturbed, your breathing becomes fast. When you've been found out, you did something and everyone found it, and then you start hyperventilating. Okay, so these are just some small points so we can become familiarized with our physiology and how these things work. So how is it important? I'm not going to have time this evening to go deeply into all the applications. So we'll do that tomorrow. But I'll just introduce one. I just introduced one for you this evening. Perhaps you've heard of a verse of Bhaktarasamrita Sindhu. Shuddha sattva visheshatma prema suryanksu samyabak ruchi bischitamasrinya krid aso bhava uchate. The meaning is that bhav is that state wherein prem, love for Krishna, is like the sun, but some rays from that sunlight of prem, they come and they enter into the citta, and the citta, which may have had some worldly impressions, it melts. It melts. Ruchi bis citta masranya. Citta masranya. See why it's important to understand what citta means? Citta masranya. The citta melts. What is it melted by? Ruchi. Ruchi means tastes. That's especially 3 tastes. That's called Bhagavat Prapt Abhilas, the desire to attain Krishna. Bhagavat Anukul Abhilas, the desire to render some favorable service to Krishna. And the Sohard Abhilas, that means the desire to have the Surid Bhav, intimate friendship with Krishna. So when the Bhav appears, like there's a son of Prem in the spiritual world, and from the eternal associate, the rays of their love enter into our citta and override our own citta vrittis. And the heart melts and becomes overwhelmed with this abhilas. Krishna, where are you? I want to serve you, not in any way, but in the exact way which is most pleasing to you at the exact moment when it's pleasing to you. Anukul seva. And I don't just want to serve you because you could serve someone and go away without really getting close to them. So hard, Abhilas, to be your surit, your friend. That means a well-wisher. That means that, usually people are praying to God, oh God, help me, I need this and that. But when Bhav comes, it's a surit Bhav. It's a well-wishing for Krishna. I want Krishna to be happy without any thought of yourself. Just like when Govardhan said, I'll give your benediction what you want. All the Brijvasis were like, we don't want anything. What are we asking? Oh yeah, okay. Just may the son of Mandamaraj be happy. It's a surid bhav. So this is bhav. Now, everyone knows this definition of bhav, Shuddha Sattva Visheshatva. But Rupa Goswami explains it in more detail in the next verse. So there in the next verse he says, Avirbhuya mano britto prajanti tat surupatam swayam prakasha rupapi basamana prakashavat. So first of all, Avirbhuya means this bhav descends. It's like an Avirbhav. You say Avirbhav, the appearance day. So it's Avirbhuya Manobrito. Bhav has its appearance day. Where? Manobrito. That means in your Manobriti or Chittavriti. Same thing. In other words, Bhav appears in your Chittavriti. So if you don't understand what a Chittavriti is, then you can't understand what Rupa Goswami is saying. We had to give all this metaphysics from the 3rd canto, from the 11th canto, to understand Bhakti Tattva here. So what happens is, just as say Lord Ramachandra is an avatar and he appears in this world, so in the same way, Samvit and Ladini, Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma means Samvit and Ladini Vritti, they come like an avatar. And where do they appear? Avirbhuya Manobrito. They appear in your Chitta Vrittis. Brajanti Tat Swarupatam, and they become one with them. In other words, you had some thoughts. Your thoughts were coming from your own movements of pran. But now, bhakti is actually aprakrita pran. It's a supernatural pran that descends as an avatar and takes over your chitta vrittis. It occupies them. It possesses them. It's like being possessed. So instead of your mind being moved by tamas and rajas, now your chitta vrittis are under the control of Samvit and Ladini. And that's called bhav. So, Swayam Prakasha Rupapi, even though Samvit is Swayam Prakash, it's a self-manifesting. But Basamana Prakashavat, it manifests Prakashavat as if Basamana. It's Rupa Goswami is using so much technical language. He's just assuming that you know everything about Vedanta and the Yoga Sutras and everything, because he does. He already knows all these things. In fact, Upadeshamrita, the second 2 verses, Atyahara Priyasastar and Utsanistya Daryat, they're actually from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika of Swatmanand Swami. They're from a Hatha Yoga book, because there's some overlap, philosophically speaking, for how you get success in sadhana. There's some overlap. So he took 2 verses from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika of Swatmananda Swami, and he just changed them a little bit. Sadbe Bhakti Prasiddhyati. By these 6 things, your bhakti becomes perfected. Like that. So they're just slightly adjusted. So Rupa Goswami knows all this, and he's using these technical languages from the other disciplines and from the other sutras, other shastras. So Basamana means if, let's say, if a yogi is going into the state of ekagrata, when he's meditating on something, it shines within his consciousness, and that's called Basamana, shining within his consciousness. And his own chitta, the yogi's atma, is illuminating that transformation of his chitta. It's material, right? It's a material thing. He's meditating on it. It appears in his mind, and his own soul is illuminating it. So that's called Bhasyamana Prakash. The soul is doing the prakash of that thing which is Bhasyamana, shining in his material mind. But here it's saying Bhasyamana Prakashyavat. It's like that, but it isn't. It isn't. Why? Because the things that you realize by the influence of Bhav are Swayam Prakash, self-manifested. They're illuminating themselves. It's not a material experience. They themselves are self-luminous. So, now what you have here, if you understand it deeply, is this. Remember, we described how the movement of pran in the chitta causes your power of perception, because the chitta transforms into a facsimile or model of the outer world, and so you experience being here, now. Right? Now, what happens when Samvit and Ladini descend and hijack your chitta vrittis? Your chitta melts. It can no longer give you impression of the world, so the world around you disappears. And it's Swayam Prakash, that means it manifests Krishna's form, qualities, and pastimes. So the appearance of bhav causes one to lose external consciousness and see the spiritual world. And that's how it happens. Amazing, huh? Is that interesting? Mm. So I'll just leave you with that thought. Right? And that's why when Mahaprabhu was initiated, he said, Kiba mantra diligo sai, Kiba tarabal, jopite jopite mantra koile pagal. Oh Gurudev, what kind of mantra you given me? I was doing japa of this mantra and now I've become mad. I'm laughing, crying, dancing. So then his guru said, you are very fortunate. And he taught him the essence of all the scriptures. Evam brataswa priyanama kirtya jatanurago druta chitta utchai hasyatati rautigayat tunmadeva nrichati lokabaya. He said, this is the essence of scriptures. When one, Evam Brata, has made a vow to chant a fixed number of Harinam every day, Priyanama Kirtya, of the names which are very dear to him, like Radha Raman, Radha Vinod Bihari, Radha Kanta, Gopinath, and Hare Krishna. Those names which are very dear to him, what happens? Evam Brataswa Priyanama Kirtya Jatanu Rago. He gets an anurag, a deep eagerness, druta chitta, and his chitta melts. Utchai, he laughs loudly. Roti, he cries, and he calls out loudly. He dances like a mad person, lokabhaya, and he doesn't care for external opinion of anyone around him or in society. Why? Because what happened when the bhav came, his chitta melted. He can't even see what's going on. But he's having a vision of the pastimes of Krishna. And if it's Krishna leaving Vrindavan on a Kru's chariot, he starts crying. If it's Krishna dressing up as a monster and jumping out in front of a gopi in the forest, and the gopi runs for her life, and he throws off his costume and he runs around like this, and he says, oh, don't be afraid, there's a hiding place here, and then he leads that gopi into a cave. Huh? He's the one who scares her and then shows up like the hero who's come to save the day. He makes the problem and gives the solution at the same time. And then she's in the cave and she's like, oh Krishna, if you hadn't appeared here today, I would have been dead. I don't know what would have happened without you. How can I ever repay you? Then Krishna moves his eyebrows. You see? So the devotee sees this and he's just laughing hysterically. He can't stop laughing. And he starts dancing like this. So how is this all going on? It's because of the appearance of bhav. And it melts away our worldly perception and gives us the divine perception. So that's what Srila Rupa Goswami is explaining here in his expanded explanation of what it really means, the appearance of bhav bhakti. Srila Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai, Srila Gurudev ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bol. Radha Govinda Ju ki jai.